Hello, ladies. Welcome to your test review podcast for Chapter 29, The Rise of Modernism, Art of the Later 19th Century. I will be covering some of the most important works that you need to know. I will also cover the work that I did not get to in class, which was The Kiss by Gustav Klimt, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about architecture since we didn't get to cover that in depth. But you are responsible for all of the required works and everything we covered in class, so I would recommend perusing your notes, looking through your worksheets, and of course playing the Jeopardy game, which is on Canvas under modules. And of course, here's our map. It's always good to kind of reacquaint yourself with what part of the world we're currently studying. Most of the work in this chapter is done in France, most of the painting anyway. We also looked at Gaudi's architecture. He's from Spain. And we also looked at Edvard Munch, who is from Norway. And we will talk about Gustav Klimt, who is from Austria. As far as events go, in the late 19th century, you still have the effects of the Enlightenment going on from earlier in the century. We talked about emphasis on science and how that came through in the art. Also is the Second Industrial Revolution and the invention of things such as textiles, steam and iron, electricity, and of course steel, which becomes really important when we get to architecture. And people like Louis Sullivan, he was not able to make his skyscraper-like buildings without the incorporation of steel and concrete. So that's important to know. So we also talked about the meaning of modern art. So what is the difference between modern art and contemporary art? Okay, hopefully you're remembering how I explained that modern art is generally art from the second half of the 19th century on, but that overlaps with contemporary art because contemporary art is art that's being made by artists who are alive and working today. And modern art is full of these isms. All right, so you got to know all of the isms, the post-impressionists and romanticism and symbolism, all the isms. You got to try to keep them straight. And modern artists become interested in the world around them, in things like still lives, genre scenes, landscape paintings, like the impressionist painters. Remember how we talked about how they would take their easels and go out into the countryside and just paint exactly what they saw in the moment. So this, of course, was considered a break with the past. Remember, we're coming from neoclassicism, which was based on history and also the revival of classical themes, as well as romanticism, which was based on idealized landscapes and also nightmarish themes. So the modern artists rejected that and are doing something completely new. And that was known as avant-garde, or artists whose work emphatically rejected the art that's being made before them. So you need to be familiar with that term as well. First ism was realism, begun by Gustave Courbet. His painting called The Stonebreakers is our first required work from the chapter. And it's exemplary of realism. It is a genre scene of two workers, one very young, one very old, who are doing this backbreaking task of smashing rocks, smashing big boulders into little rocks. So everyday mundane activities that prior to this would have been considered not beautiful enough to be depicted in a painting. We also looked at Honor Daumier briefly, and this is his nadir raising photography to the height of art. So nadir was not only an artist, but he was a journalist and a printmaker. So a lot of his satirical cartoons were popular and published in local French newspapers. Go back and familiarize yourself with Manet and his paintings. There's definitely a bunch of questions about Manet on the test. And this painting, of course, is really important. It's a required work. We talked about it a lot. We compared it to Titian's Venus of Urbino. So look at your notes and recall what we talked about in class. But one thing that I'm not sure I emphasized enough was just how outrageous this was when it was first debuted. And there were a number of factors that led to that. So what did we talk about? Why was this so controversial? Hopefully you're recalling that, first of all, we're looking at a nude woman who was a well-known prostitute in Paris at the time. She's looking straight out at us. He uses very flat planes of color. There's no pretty modeling or chiaroscuro like you would see in Titian's Venus of Urbino. She is also gazing out at us, but in a more sensual way. And this was, of course, the ideal, beautiful female form, whereas Manet's is very pasty looking. Many critics said it looked like a cadaver. And also his contrast of this stark black background and the black maid with the white bed sheets and the pasty white skin was also very shocking to people. On to the Impressionists, who, as we learned, were very interested in the effects of light on color, and also everyday outdoor scenes and very textured brushstrokes, a lot of impasto. So we looked at Claude Monet, who is said to be the father of Impressionism. We talked about the Saint Lazare train station, and then I showed you some of his paintings, such as the Haystack series and Rouen Cathedral, which were series of paintings, and that was also very popular with the Impressionists, and especially Monet would do many series of the same thing at different times of day. Also compared Renoir to Henri Toulouse-Lautrec's painting of At the Moulin Rouge, where he uses color juxtapositions to create this very eerie sort of feel. So it's, you know, a good contrast between the Impressionists' light pastel daylight scenes. So here we see a Parisian scene of people socializing, a gathering, but these people are at a bar. It's kind of sketchy, and it's more of this satirical undertone going on. And then we talked about Van Gogh quite a lot. And I want you to think about the way he used color. How was it different from the Impressionists? And what criticisms did the post-Impressionists have on the Impressionists? So remember the gang of four, the post-Impressionist gang of four: Van Gogh, Gauguin, Seurat, and Cézanne, and their different styles. And Van Gogh, of course, used color in a very different way, in a more expressive way. And the required work for the post-Impressionists is Starry Night, of course, which we talked about in depth, and we talked about how it has meaning with all of the depressive deep blues, how it was kind of a mishmash of different landscapes that he had seen, and how he painted it while he was in an insane asylum. So it very much expresses his kind of turmoiled inner self. And I also explained to you how this is considered by many people to be the first expressionist painting. Paul Gauguin's Where Do We Come From, What Are We, Where Are We Going is also a required work. He's also a post-impressionist who worked closely with Van Gogh. He also uses color in a very symbolic, expressive way, and his painting is explaining sort of his feelings on the cycle of life. And he also spent a lot of time in France, but also moved to Tahiti. Remember, we talked about how he had his little girlfriend, and he did a lot of these paintings, which have that Tahitian influence to them. Is another really important post-impressionist that you need to know about. He did a lot of landscape paintings. He did a lot of still life paintings. He was very interested in the underlying structure of landscape, and he would often paint landscapes and still lifes from different views and kind of composite them together. He's also said to be possibly the first modern painter. We talked about that in depth. Cezanne, like the other post-impressionists, was very interested in color relationships and studied color relationships and employed his findings into his paintings. So remember how I said he discovered that cool colors recede behind warm colors. So he would include cooler hues in the background and warmer hues in the middle ground and the foreground. So that's important to note as well. And another interesting part about this painting is that it, as we said in class, is on the brink of being abstract. He has not used a lot of blending. It's very piecey almost, and so you can see how this would have influenced the Cubists. Remember how I said that people like Picasso and Braque were very influenced by Paul Cézanne, because he has this approach where it's almost on the brink of being abstract, which was very avant-garde for the time, very new. Skip quite a bit of material because I'm running out of time, and I want to make sure that I get to Gustav Klimt because we didn't talk about him in class, and he's one of my favorite artists. He has such a distinct style, which is very easy to spot. So if you get an attribution question about him on the AP exam, you should be able to nail it, I think. And also what is interesting about him is that his early work is very realistic looking, and then his later work takes on this very geometric, golden, luxurious type style, which has clear ties to the Art Nouveau movement. And I talked briefly, I think, about Art Nouveau, and I said it, you know, it has lots of undulating lines and vine-like patterns and such. So you'll see that throughout his work as well. He also employed a new format for his paintings, which wasn't popular at all before this, but he liked the square format. So you'll see a lot of his works are done with the square. He becomes sort of obsessed with this gold pattern type style after visiting the Church of San Vitale in Ravenna, Italy, which we studied when we looked at Byzantine art. And hopefully you're recalling all of the mosaics that are inside of San Vitale. Remember Justinian and his attendants and Theodora, okay? All of those beautiful, colorful, golden mosaics really fascinated him, and he employed that style into his painting. He was also very interested in nude women and intimate scenes. These are some other paintings by him, and this is, I love this picture of him because he's just cuddling with his cat, which is so cute. But I also put this in here because this is our old friend Judith. Remember Judith slaying Holofernes by Caravaggio and by Artemisia Gentileschi? This is his take on Judith, which I just love because she's the total femme fatale, you know, with the bare breasts, and she's kind of tilting her chin up and looking out at us. So I think that one is a pretty cool painting. So yeah, a lot of his later work looks like this, very mosaic-like, lots of pattern and lots of sumptuous color and lots of gold. And I'm going to end with Louis Sullivan. We talked about him a little bit in class. You guys did a really nice comparison with the Houses of Parliament. And he is also said to be the first modern architect because of his form follows function mantra, that the shape and design of a building should reflect its purpose. He's also said to be the father of the skyscraper. He employed steel, this new material that's a result of the Industrial Revolution, and came up with this formula for what each floor in the building should be used for. So be familiar with him. and good luck studying, and I will see you tomorrow.